I started to build instruments just for myself. I put a workbench up in my bedroom in my rented apartment in Brooklyn and bolted it into the wall, and had to fix that later when we moved out to have the landlord be calm about it. Anyhow, I really started to build instruments just to have a decent instrument for myself. And of course, I spent a lot of time working on the first one, and it came out looking very nice, but had some serious issues in terms of lack of understanding of peghead angles and other things.
This was way back when?
This was probably, I started the first instrument in 1973, and it started as a business in '76. Originally, I was part of the Brooklyn Woodworkers Cooperative. Dear friend of mine, Billy Thomas, whose family came from Wales and were 5 or 6 generations of woodworkers, taught me how to do woodworking, and was very proud that everybody in his family had maintained all of their fingers for all of those years, which, hey, you know, woodworking machinery absolutely needs to be treated with great respect. It's potentially dangerous, and we have a great safety record here. Anyhow, he and I and some others were forming a woodworkers cooperative shop, which rented a 4,000 square foot loft space in an old factory building in Brooklyn. And the members did different things like cabinet work and custom furniture. And we shared this space, which was a great place to start a business because we rented this 4,000 square feet, including heat and electricity, for $450 a month, including a freight elevator, which was useful because it was on the 4th floor. One of the other members of the group eventually was Ned Steinberger, who Billy and I met when we went to look at some machinery. He was working as an assistant for a cabinet maker who was retiring, and Ned was about to be displaced, and asked if he could join our little group, and we found a 10-foot by 5-foot space for him in the corner of the shop. And he was at that point studying design at the Cooper Hewitt Museum School of Design, industrial design and furniture design. He wound up working for Thone Furniture, designing chairs, some of which wound up in airports, and observed me building instruments and said, hey, that's interesting. I bet I could design something. I went, well, by all means, give it a shot. And about a week later, he came back with the prototype of what is still the NS bass. And the curved body on it was part and parcel of his training in ergonomics and the melding of form and function and how it interacts with the body.
So it wasn't really a reaction to anything else that was in the market?
Absolutely, no. It was completely original in terms of his concept and his experience. And Ned I was very lucky. I mean, Ned is a very talented and brilliant guy. And sidebar, his father, who is a physicist, was the co-discoverer of the neutrino and the recipient of the Nobel Prize in Physics.
Wow.
About 10 years ago or so. Ned got to go to the party in Stockholm and said they threw a great party. Anyhow, I'm still good friends with Ned, and of course he's gone on and continues to do all sorts of wonderful design work.
Yeah.
And can sometimes be a bit of the absent-minded professor, but is a wonderful, wonderful guy, and have a great relationship.
And what was the sort of growth curve for you guys? Was there a breakthrough moment, or was it pretty gradual?
Well, it was a combination of both. I started with my ex-partner Alan Charney, and we were making instruments and selling them on 48th Street in Manhattan to a dealer there. And we were lucky in that fairly early on, very early on, a dealer from Hamburg, Germany showed up, liked them, and said, I want to buy 12 of them. And Steve Friedman, the dealer, said, look, I'm not going to get in the middle of this. Here's Burkhard Bergerhoff from Amtown in Hamburg. And so we started exporting instruments, which is wonderful. I mean, I'm very grateful that we have a worldwide market for our instruments. It's just terrific in terms of the opportunities. And not the least is having relationships, the rare treasure of having relationships with people all over the world is fantastic. Music is a worldwide thing, musical instruments are worldwide, and to be part of that, and having friends and colleagues all over the planet is something that I'm eternally grateful for. So anyhow, we were making instruments in this loft in Brooklyn, then moved downstairs one floor and had our own 4,000 square foot space to operate in. Among my first employees was Vinny Fodera, who is, of course, an incredibly talented builder and a great guy, and still a dear friend. It's always wonderful to see him and his family. One of the big breakthroughs in terms of our credibility and exposure, a dealer in St. Louis ordered a white neck-through bass to coincide with the police tour. And he was located in St. Louis, Missouri. He knew when they came through town he was going to show it to them. And Dan Martin, who has passed away, unfortunately, had a white limousine, which he drove himself, and had bribed all the security guards at the St. Louis Arena. So when bands came through town, Dan, who was a purveyor of vintage instruments, sold vintage guitars to Eddie Van Halen, sold him a Spector bass, etc. He would drive into the St. Louis Arena with his white limo at sound check, drive to the front of the stage, open up the trunk, put out all these toys on the apron of the stage and go, "Okay, lads, you're halfway through the tour, you've made some money, time to buy yourself some toys." And he showed the white bass to Danny Quattrochi, who is still Sting's tech. Danny looked at it and went, "Wow, looks nice. Okay, let me show it to the boss." Handed it to Sting. Sting played it all through sound check, played it all through the show, handed it back to the techs, and as the limo was about to leave, the door was still open, pointed to Dan and said to the accountant, "Write that man a check." And God bless him, played it for every night of the 2.5 years or so of the Synchronicity tour, and it's on the DVD. And then he donated it to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum, where it is part of their permanent collection. And until recently, it was the premier object in the display. As you came into the museum, across the plaza, down the escalator where the exhibits start below ground level, there was a circular display booth. And the first object that was seen as you came off the escalator was Sting's white Spector bass, which is a tremendous honor. Just as big an honor was that we were sharing that display case. On the other side of it was Leo Fender's first prototype no-caster, the one with the goofy square peg head. And so that is something that I am tremendously honored to be in anywhere near that sort of company.
And what is it about your instruments, your basses, that appeals to you? What's the point of difference that your basses give players? What is it they like about your gear?
Well, one of the things we pride ourselves on is making incredibly versatile instruments in terms of their tonal range and responsiveness and playability. I mean, we've had numerous, because of the carbon fiber and the truss rod and the way in which we build the necks and do the fretwork and all of the construction, they play with a very low action, if you want it that way. The electronics of the instrument have been, the electronic circuit is made for us by an engineer in New Jersey, Henry Zajac, and I've worked with him for over 30 years now. And when I first sat down to do the preamp with him, it was done in a very scientific fashion. We had a breadboard version of the preamp and a bass, and I sat down and he plugged in different variations of capacitors and resistors, and I went, yes, that sounds good. No, that doesn't sound good. And so it was purely done by what sounded right to me. And thank God that seems to have been useful and appeal to a wide range of people playing different types of music.
And has it evolved? Have artists got involved, and with the sound and the manufacturing in terms of what they want?
Yes, well, we're certainly try to be responsive to that. One of the early changes was this reversed P pickup. Hold on a second, I'll just grab the instrument here. Here's an NS2, and and these are actually Geezer Butler pickups here on this one from EMG, was this reversed arrangement of the P bobbin, which was in response to a request by a bass player named David Schwartz, who had played with John Hall and also went on to write the theme music for the TV show Northern Exposure, and has had a very nice career out west. But anyhow, he was the first one who suggested this to me, and so we did that. We made a bass for him like that, and basically what it's done is increased the bass response on the treble string and the clarity on the bass string in this position here. So that seems to have worked out, nicely, and was an early and very formative example of player input into it.
And manufacturing-wise, you have where we are now?
Right, yes, our workshop here in Woodstock, New York. I also have been involved since before the Velvet Revolution with the factory in the Czech Republic, which I really helped to get going as a guitar operation. They were, for many years, primarily an accordion factory. And Peter Wiekadal, the manager and owner and director of NBE, is a great guy, speaks 6 languages fluently, has a master's degree in business, and started in the originally communist-owned factory as a college graduate, but the director said, no, you're going to work in every department. So Peter worked in every department. When I first met him before the revolution, he was sleeping at his lunch break on the floor of the finishing department because he would spend every weekend driving to the Schaller factory in Germany to work, and there was no Autobahn then connecting them, and then driving back to work at the Litzia factory. And they have a long history, of course, of all kinds of precision manufacturing in the Czech Republic, a lot of it for armaments, which in the wake of the end of the Cold War has gone dormant and moved on to other things. But of course, incredible musical instrument manufacturing of pianos, upright basses, violins, etc., etc. And it's been just wonderful people to work with, and immediately I felt kinship with them. It's Bohemia, and they really just had a Milan, who is the head guitar maker and tooling sort of maker there, does not speak any English. I speak a little bit of German, and my Czech is limited to hello, how are you, and can I have a beer? But Milan and I can communicate with sketches on cocktail napkins, being both guitar guys, and it's great. I could just draw something while we're having a beer and go, no, 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 which in Czech means yes, 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 because the word for yes in Czech is ano. So when they're speaking fast, they go no, 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 which means yes, yes, yes. And so I have a long relationship with them, and they make wonderful instruments for us, both in neck-through and bolt-on formats. And they, after the revolution, managed to privatize the place and have basically bought part of the grounds of the old original factory and have a wonderful operation going there in Hořovice, which is about 40 kilometers west of Prague.
Yeah, and they're using the same woods, same sources, and
we supply the figured maple comes from our same supplier in the Pacific Northwest. The hard maple for the necks also comes from our same supplier out in western New York State, and we supply them with carbon fiber also from our same vendors. They get EMG and Aguilar pickups from the USA. We've worked with an engineer in the Czech Republic who makes some of the tone circuits, Peter Michalik, who is a self-taught electronics engineer, grew up in a coal mining town in Silesia, and could not afford an amplifier, so built his own bass amp, and is a terrific bass player, and has a terrific ear. So those are some of the people we're working with over there. And then we also work with for over 20 years now, with a wonderful factory in South Korea, World Musical Instruments, who do production for a lot of other brands. In fact, Paul Smith of Paul Reed Smith walked into my stand many years ago and said, hey, this stuff looks really good. Who makes that? And of course, I turned them on to Mr. Wan, and so they're making all the PRS SE instruments there, and for many other companies. But they do a fantastic job. They're one of the great guitar factories in the world, and I have a long-time personal relationship with Mr. Wan, who owns it. Among the times that I've been through the factory, one of the people who I made a very big deal out of thanking and bowing and scraping to were the ladies who do the fretwork, because they do such a superlative job, and I really, wanted them to understand that I appreciate what a great job they do and how terrific the instruments play. And of course, the finished quality. I want to take this opportunity to say that the way to really make a guitar maker angry is to say, oh, that guitar looks like it was dipped in plastic. I wish we could dip it in plastic. The most skilled craftspeople in the world have labored for hours over it, sanding it with multiple grits, polishing it, etc., to get it to look like it's dipped in plastic. And there is no consumer product in the world that has a higher quality finish to it than guitars. If you look at the finish of the least expensive, decent guitar, and you can't sell not decent guitars in this world anymore, the finish of it is better than the finish on a Mercedes-Benz. It really, if you look closely, it's just astonishing. So yeah, it's, and the other thing that I'd like to say is that there are so many, it's a rare opportunity and privilege to be able to make quality things that we intend to last for hundreds of years if people are still interested in playing music, and that they can pass on to their kids, etc. And that's just a rare privilege in a world that's full of disposable commodities.
Built-in obsolescence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, and also that it's, in English, of course, it's playing music, and everybody involved in the MI business are all kids at heart, because if we were just in it for the money, there's a lot of other ways and better ways to make money than being involved with music. But there's nothing like the joy of playing music and the fact that it's such a worldwide endeavor that's one of the wonderful things about it.
And where's the brand reach internationally at the moment? Are you pretty much in all territories, or is there still room for you guys to expand elsewhere?
Well, if any wholesalers are listening in from Sweden and Denmark and Norway, we're looking for you. We've got a lot of other locations covered. We have vendors and distributors around the world in over 30 countries. Among the dealers, our quote-unquote distributor in Malta, who I had the pleasure of visiting last spring, actually per capita has probably sold more Spector basses. Charles and his just late departed father, Felix Busatil, at Band-Aid Music in Malta, have sold over the last, 6 years or so, probably about 30 or 40 Spector basses, mostly Korean ones, in a place that has a population of a couple of 100,000, and I met most of the bass players there and had a great time. So,
and in terms of the ratio of, you have some manufactured in Czech Republic and in Korea, what's the sort of ratio in terms of sales that?
Actually, the times that I've analyzed it, numerically, of course, it's different, but in terms of actual revenues, they're about equal, because the USA instruments, of course, are much more expensive. The Czech Republic ones somewhere in the middle. Mm-hmm. The Korean ones are, cover the lower and upper entry, levels. So those pretty much, balance out. And in terms of numerical quantities, we make about 30 instruments a month here in the USA workshop. On average, the Czech Republic probably does about 80 to 100 instruments a month. And the Korean operation, on average, probably does about 200, 300 a month over the course of a year.
Right. And in the UK, it's mainly you've got selling Czech and Korean?
Yeah. Yes, Barnes & Mullins is representing us and distributing the Czech and the Korean instruments. And everything, when I was a kid, my first instrument I bought from a schoolmate used, it was a Zimgar electric guitar. Horrendous piece of junk. And my first customization project was that the rocker switches on it were positioned so that when I strummed the guitar, they shut the guitar off. So I duct taped them in the on position. Anyhow, you cannot sell instruments that are not great instruments in this day and age, which is really good. And the reason we've built loyalty among customers is that you can always buy something cheaper than a Spector, okay? But in terms of value, the way we've always tried to compete is by, okay, whatever price point we can offer it at, it's going to be the best playing, sounding, and featured instrument in that class. And I think that we've really managed to achieve that and continue to achieve that. And we've so built in loyalty among the customers of somebody who started with one of the Korean instruments and then continued playing and said, hey, I'm saving up and I'm getting one of the Czech Republic instruments. And we have numerous high-profile bands that play over the world that are using either the Korean or the Czech Republic instruments on stages, on tour, all over the world.
And you tend to find you have a lot of brand loyalty, so when someone comes to Spector, they kind of stick with it.
One of the gratifying things is getting emails from customers saying exactly what I said about, hey, I started playing when I was 12 or 13 and I got one of these. My parents got me one of these Korean instruments and I loved it, and now I've moved up and I've saved up and I'm still playing and have gotten one of the higher end instruments. And that's been quite a repeat story, an ongoing story.
What's your view, your take on the bass market at the moment? What kind of shape is it in? Because I mean, we've obviously had some tough times in the MI market, but do you see that there's it's picking up now as well?
It's definitely picking up some, and we had a discussion the other night about the technological circle of that as revenues from recording have dropped considerably for all of the technological reasons. One of the things, the ineffable things, is that people are still willing to pay for the joy of being at a live performance, of hearing the music made live, of being there with their friends and sharing the experience. And this is true on every level of the music industry, from Paul McCartney on down, the Rolling Stones, etc. The way people are once again making their living, as they did before the advent of recording in the early 20th century, is by playing live. And you need instruments to do that, thank God. And hopefully it, continues to generate new bands and new material and, new reiterations of different types of music that keep people loving it and enjoying it.
And what about going forward? I mean, I believe you've got some new stuff coming out. NAMM?
Well, I'll show you a roughly cobbed together.
One we prepared earlier.
Yes, here's a new instrument which will debut at NAMM, not cobbed together like this, but this is an acoustic electric, which has got this carved reclaimed redwood from water tank tops on it, and a Fishman Jazz piezo bridge, which has really worked remarkably well for the acoustic sound, and an EMG active pickup, which the impedance matched very nicely on this. And this is a bolt-on. The back of this one is alder, one of our normal bolt-on next to it. This has an Aguilar preamp in it, an Aguilar OB3 preamp, and these will be, once we sort out the impedance issue, will be available with Aguilar pickups as a magnetic option to it. So this is one of the new projects we've been working on, and there'll be some other things in the next year also.
You seem to be always trying to source wood from unusual places and unusual sources. Is that a what's the reason behind that? Is it just for a tone thing, or
or
a cost thing?
It's everything. I mean, like as I said earlier, it's like when I first started buying figured maple, I could buy 10-foot long boards of it and a pile of them, and that's gone by the wayside. And I got onto this redwood through a vendor that's here barely about 3 miles from our shop, And his business involves salvaging timbers from buildings that are being torn down. And in this area, there are buildings that are hundreds of years old. This was an early, I mean, Kingston, New York was the first capital of New York State. So he would come up with different timbers, and a lot of them actually, you know, were too heavy. Like first when he said, oh, here's some 200-year-old pine members from, you know, a beam or something, and he cut me up a couple of chunks of it, and they weighed about 15 pounds. I went, this is not what I'm looking for. And then I came down there and he said, hey, I've got this reclaimed redwood, which is from water tanks from New York City. I went, well, this is worth checking out. And it's resonant and it's lightweight. It also is old growth redwood that's been reclaimed and is continuing to be used, which is nice. And I don't have one of them here, but last year at NAMM we debuted a USA base that we weren't sure what we were going to call it, but the neck-through wings were made with, the back was the reclaimed redwood and the top was sycamore, which is a local wood that grows in the woods around here, and looks sort of like lacewood when it's quarter sawn. Anyhow, Jimmy put the base together and we put a bridge on it and wired it all up, and it weighed 7.5 pounds. And we got to the NAMM show and we still didn't have a name for it yet because it arrived wired up at the NAMM show by FedEx Red, as happens. And my partner PJ and I were driving for breakfast to the show, and he said, what are we going to call this thing? And I went, let's call it Helium. And I went, okay. And we get to the booth, and my first meeting is with Dennis Meredith from the Bass Place in Arizona, and he comes in, and I start to give him the dog and pony show about it. He goes, what'd you do, inject it with helium? I went, call the trademark attorney. That sells it. Done and dusted. So it's the helium base.
And do you find with some of the new restrictions on woods and new laws that are surrounding those, do you find you have to be more creative in where you source product from?
Well, it's certainly with the Lacey Act and these other things, you certainly have to be aware of it. We don't use anything that's currently, you know, on the list. We did have some, I believe, I'm not sure about it, we had used in the past some Honduran rosewood, which I think may have been added, but we haven't used it in years. So it's certainly something that you have to be aware of. We have a permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and we have a customs broker who assiduously makes sure that the paperwork is filled out properly. When all this brouhaha started with Gibson, okay, I immediately knew that they weren't culpable. It was like, this is idiotic. These guys, Gibson, there are things you can say about some of the people with Gibson that, you know, they're not real popular, etc. Okay, great company, great history, etc. But there was no way that they would have purchased in any way a prohibited species and brought it into the U.S. Why would you do that? You can't build anything out of it. You can't charge anything for it, etc. And I knew that somebody in Hamburg at Theodor Nagel put the wrong plank on the boat, and it wound up costing them millions of dollars. So, you know, and I think honestly that I am all in favor of protecting endangered species, but I think that some of the bureaucrats at the Fish and Wildlife Service have really gotten out of hand. And I certainly hope they don't come looking at us. There's nothing to see.
But we love them.
And Senator Charles Schumer, our senator, has been a staunch supporter of us when we've had bureaucratic issues. God bless him.
Well, that's good.
He may be a rascal, but he's our rascal.
And so what does the future hold for Spector? I mean, just keep on keeping on, or is there, what's the next challenge for you guys?
I am now starting to do research on doing carved top acoustic instruments, both basses and guitars,
Right.
Which I'm very excited about, and have done some drawing, some research. I've had the assistance of the wisdom of a fellow in New York named Larry Wexer, who is certainly New York City's premier dealer of archtop jazz guitars and their ilk, and has been gracious enough to give me his overview and to allow me access to his collection of D'Angelicos, D'Acquistos, vintage Gibsons, etc. And in the next weeks or so, I'm going to go down there with a high-tech measuring device and just put little magnets inside them and measure the thickness of the tops and things like that. So that's something that I will be working on, in which we will have some, and that'll be a lot of fun.
So that's actually in a whole new areas. I mean, that's,
Totally,
you know,
absolutely, something
You're not just a
complete.
base manufacturer then.
Well, yes. Well, we've always, for years now, we've made some electric guitars, and really the challenge has been fitting them into the production schedule when people are clamoring for their basses. So among the people that I have playing the electric guitars is Marshall Crenshaw, who I'm a big fan of. So totally jazzed to have him loving our guitar and using it on his recordings and performances. And so we've been making some electric guitars. But in this carved top thing, we will be making acoustic arch top basses that can be played acoustically. And it's sort of a good format for doing that because of the strength that you generate from the top with the structure of the arch itself. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
Excellent. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stuart. I think we're done.
Pleasure.
Well, that's great.